you, Satinder. That was very, very insightful. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So, in the next 20 minutes or so, what I thought I could do is talk about three things. Are you going to get 30 minutes? I don't think how is it.
It's organized.
Now you. Ouch. It worked. Great. So I want to talk about, a very different way that you can look at Rockwell Automation, not as a technology company, but as a global manufacturer, 115 years, and grappling with exactly the same challenges that manufacturers anywhere in the world are. So how we've transformed our own supply chain, I want to share a little bit about our experiences. And I was talking to Dr. Monica yesterday, I thought what I could also include here is we have a ringside view to many of our large Indian manufacturers, both Indian originating companies as well as global companies. And what are some of the things that we are witnessing? The manner in which they are improvising their supply chains. I think it'll just be a data point for you all to reflect on. And lastly, I want to just throw out over there some new innovations for those of you who are intimately involved with manufacturing and warehousing, food for thought, right? And then both Satinder and I will be happy to take questions, and let's just have a discussion. So, quick introduction about Rockwell Automation. We are a 115-year-old company, a global technology leader, about $7 billion in sales. Serving customers about in about 80 countries, in about 20 major manufacturing verticals, right? This is our point of view, and I want to just lay it out over there. Our point of view about smart manufacturing, and you can call it by any name, Industry 4.0, etc., right? Essentially the way to realize smart manufacturing is organizations need to evolve, but in addition to that, an entire ecosystem needs to evolve. It's good to see that governments are taking initiatives now for well over a decade or more, right? But technology has a role to play. Manufacturers have always used technologies, but what is happening right now is the convergence of conventional shop floor technologies with new age technologies like mobility and whatnot, right, that you've heard about. But if Industry 4.0 across an entire ecosystem has to happen, now we are switching over to talking about supply chains, right? Standards have a very important role to play, and we have not even begun, right, from an India perspective, right? So industry standards and interoperability is essential. I want to just lay it out there. And I think we are here at DCI as a manufacturing council, right? Industry consortia have a very, very important role to play to assemble and then disseminate best practices, which will help other people, probably small size organizations, to take risk out of their deployments, right? This is just what our point of view is. What I'm going to do now is to switch over and talk a little bit about a different way to introduce ourselves, which is this. So Rockwell is a global manufacturer. We had 20 plants about 15 years ago when we committed ourselves to completely refootprint our manufacturing and transform our supply chain. So we have close to about 400,000 SKUs, right? Like I said, 20 plants. It's not atypical for us to have orders from our customers which have up to 200 different SKUs, right? As Satinder and I were joking, right, he comes from an industry where product obsolescence is in months, probably 24, 36 months. And we serve manufacturing industry, if you're say from oil and gas, right? And if we come in and announce to you that, a part that we supplied 3 years ago is obsolete now, you wouldn't want to see us again at all, right? So we have in India, I wouldn't even take oil and gas as an example. I take something a little bit more simpler, maybe cement, right? There are cement plants that are using, systems supplied by us 25 plus years ago, right? And it's working, and they don't feel the need to upgrade it, right? Now they are, because they want to have more rich information coming out of these process control systems, right? But anyhow, the industry that we serve is requiring us to ensure product availability for decades, right? 10, 15, up to 20 years. But at the same time, our backward supply chain upstreams, right? We are dealing with exactly the same challenges that Satinder was talking about, right? So the component suppliers are really disrupting us big time, right? And that's a very, very painful position to be in, if you know what I'm saying, right? And then the diversity of our operations. So on the one hand, we have standard, product catalog of parts that are as simple as, stack lights and push buttons, which you ship in a couple of days' time, right? Have it available on stock, all the way across to engineered to order systems, which are lineup of medium voltage drive panels, going up to $500,000, an average order, right? And these have a lead time which could go well into 20 plus weeks, right? So it's a fairly complex supply chain, and no matter which way we looked at it, our future was not looking secure, and we knew that we had to do something, right? We were grappling with supplier discontinuity challenges. We were grappling with product quality issues which were not easily traceable. So to root cause them was turning out to be very, very problematic. So in short, the more you analyze and the more we prolonged, it was just turning out to be extremely difficult to visualize how we're going to scale and how we're going to make ourselves available to where the center of gravity of the business was shifting, which was towards emerging markets. This I'm talking about 2005, which is when we committed ourselves to this journey, right? And I'm going to skip past this. You've heard Satinder talk about something which is kind of similar, right? This is sort of like the journey that we've taken, but eventually it came down to us, almost entirely re-scripting our global supply chain, right? We had 20 plants, about 3,000 suppliers, and we ended up at the end of a decade-long journey. We have now 9 plants. We ended up moving 70% of our manufacturing. We terminated 1,000 suppliers, right? And the balance we had them co-locate with our major manufacturing facilities, right? But most of all, and this is what I'm going to now talk about, the issues that we discovered, and it is not a surprise for you at all. There were issues related to people and talent, because we were, despite us being a technology company, we recognized that in our factories, in our plants, the use of technology, while the machines were highly automated, but the processes were not. And the processes were not even standard. The systems were not interconnectable, right? And best practices from one plant could not be taken to another plant, right? And these were extremely limiting factors. And as we started using more and more technology, we realized that availability of talent was turning out to be a huge challenge, right? So eventually we ended up creating global processes, and we used one common instance of an ERP system, which was SAP, and one common instance of an MES system, which was our own, right? Which did not exist till that point in time. We've been serving our manufacturing customers, which are for industries represented. Some of them are right here in the room, but we were not implementing it within our own kitchens, shall we say, right? So processes were weak, were not scalable. Talent was a huge challenge, and technology was all over the map. This is eventually what we ended up implementing, which is an IT/OT convergence that allowed us to have enterprise systems, and all of the enterprise functionalities, merged along with live plant floor and manufacturing data that comes in from things like things that we call as the IoT things, right? These are machines, actuators, drives, what have you, right? All the way across plants and warehouses, right? And getting seamlessly connected, right, to enterprise-wide systems, and that has unlocked several new possibilities for us, which I'm going to summarize for you. So, at the end of about a decade or so, and this is information of about 4 years back, right? We presented it to our own investors. This implementation and the journey that I just spoke about has actually allowed us to drastically improve our service levels to our customers. So that's the single most, beneficial sort of, advantage that we've incurred, right? It's also allowed us to reduce our defect levels, so improve our quality, 60% reduction in parts per million. And really, all of these are factors which are straight away dropping right down to the balance sheet, right? 30% capex avoidance. So literally, you're uncovering hidden factories. But most importantly, it's allowing us to drive continuous improvements. It's giving us about 4 to 5% improvement in productivity on a year-on-year basis, right? So it was easier said than done. It was an organization-wide, I would say, a revolution, right? We literally had to create, we had to disrupt the structure of the organization itself, right? And we've created internal COEs as we deployed these changes. A whole lot of the later redeployments were supported by the COE itself, so meaning it were Rockwell people and not consultants who were going out and supporting the changes in either countries or in different factories. And I just wanted to flash it up over here, recognizing that many of us are people from manufacturing, right? So this is from our own factories, right? And how IT and OT convergence has actually given us brand new insights which we never really had access to. So the manner in which we've been able to take, our assembly machines level data, manufacturing history, and if you mash it up with your, field returns, coming in through your CRM systems, that's allowing us to analyze our warranty data in a very different light, right? This wasn't possible at that global scale at all earlier. And then there are many other things, which are there for you to just quickly eyeball, right? So I just wanted to lay it out over there. These are the kind of things. This is hard work, grunts, bit and bite, right? But this is what is giving us the bottom line advantage that I laid out for you. So I'm going to now switch over quickly and talk about, what is it that we're witnessing, right? And some of this is stuff that we've heard from our customers, some of that we've directly participated in. And I'm just sharing it with you, just so you know what's going on in terms of supply chain optimization and improvisation right here in our own countries in different industries. First and foremost, we serve the life sciences pharmaceuticals industry, very, very closely. That industry, as you know, they've been very heavily regulated for a very long period of time. And as Indian companies are becoming global manufacturing leaders, particularly in the generic space, they're getting subjected to, A, regulations, B, they're also being exposed to spurious product supply, right? Which they obviously have deep concerns around, right? So traceability is very important. We've been implementing with one of our large Indian market leaders from biopharmaceuticals a serialization solution, right? What it allows you to do as individual, person in our private capacities is pick a product and you can authenticate whether the product is real or fake, right? Now that's very easy and it's a great value to an individual user, but that requires you to significantly reprogram your manufacturing and your supply chain, and it's a huge undertaking. I submit to you that Indian manufacturers are coming of age and they are implementing these programs. Our domain experts and consultants within the organization find it to be pretty world-class. Second example, and I'll skip past this one. Second example is basically from the tobacco industry. And again, this is from a very large, Indian tobacco maker, right? They're again implementing track and trace and serialization, but for a very different reason. It's not for regulation for the reason why pharmaceutical companies are implementing, but it is because taxation authorities are making it compelling. So it's a European regulation. It's called the TDP2, which has already come in force. But India is going to be having similar regulations. I think it's got delayed out a little bit, right? And it's going to have a massive impact on the supply chain. What it actually puts the burden of ensuring that the manufacturer has complete visibility of the product, no matter which state of the supply chain it lies in, right? So again, manufacturers, some of you probably sitting here in the audience, are already grappling with this change. And again, some people that we've been engaged with, the manner in which you all are organizing your own teams and creating cross-functional, is is quite inspiring to see. And I just wanted to share this one. And this one is from a different end of the spectrum. This is a global beverage maker. I'm sorry I'm not sharing these names here because we didn't take a permission from those companies, but it's for you to guess. So this is a global beverage maker. Their experience from here in India after GST came into force, and once GST made it easy for you to have very large DCs as opposed to smaller warehouses. They've gone about, actually implementing. They've already had a couple of these very large distribution centers that have been implemented, and their results are very impressive. So already they've had upwards of 35 crores, in supply chain cost reduction, right? But just look at some of the other benefits that they've already been able to accrue, right? So pretty impressive, and this is happening right here, right? We are playing roles in the warehouses. So as large size warehouses are coming into being now, right? There's a whole different use case of automation that's coming in, which is what I'm going to actually throw out over there. So warehouses, they are as these e-commerce companies are coming in, as scales are increasing, the manner in which ASRS systems have existed for a long period of time, and automation, robots have been there for a long period of time. But the problem that users are trying to solve right now is, as opposed to every use case which you program into an automation system, which was known, how do you grapple with randomness, right? And there are some new innovations that are coming in. One that we are particularly excited about is what we call as ICT, or independent cart technology, which is a disruption to conveying, right? Where you could literally have individual carts which have their own identity, and you could address them individually, right? How they're allowing people to reimagine manufacturing and warehousing is very interesting. Right? So we recently created a digital transformation experience center where we've built up a mini factory which brings us out, and I just wanted to lay it out over there. So that's the content that I had, and but Goenka, that leaves us with about 20 minutes for discussions.
Yes. So thank you, Kiran, for very different perspective coming from
two industries, one where the life cycle is in months and one where it's in multiple years. But you can see that many of the supply chain challenges are very similar. Multiple factories all around the world, number of suppliers running in thousands, and how you tackle that. So let me open it up for discussion now from anyone. And again, I would like to sort of focus on what does it all mean for India? How does India benefit from, quote unquote, the crisis that China has today of coronavirus? And of course, many of us are affected by that. But that aside, is an opportunity for India, and how does India tap into it? And there are many companies today, they are thinking that we probably need to mitigate the risk of supply chain coming down heavily on a crisis like this. And how do we fulfill the aspiration that the finance minister talked about, as I said in the very beginning. So open it up for any discussion that you may have, or anything that you may want. Can you use it?
I am Arvind Kaushik from LNT Hydrocarbon. So do you have any suggestions for the hydrocarbon or oil and gas industry? What kind of processes they can have for improvement in security? Because the issue that we have is, you see, we are dealing with bulk, not bulk, but heavy equipment like compressors, pumps, valves for every EPC project that we execute. So what kind of, say, modern technologies are available that can be implemented for improving the supply chain?
So you're talking about your upstreams or downstreams, meaning your product to customers, or
No,
your equipments in
our equipment that we are buying, I mean, we are using equipment for our clients.
Correct.
So we are in EPC contractors.
Correct.
So these heavy equipment suppliers, most of the time these are mandated by the client.
That's right.
So what kind of processes can be involved?
So Mr. Kaushik, two use cases that immediately come to mind. One is, you've got extremely expensive capital equipment, which you will be moving to some very inhospitable places, right? Remote monitoring and diagnostics has been known to really make it very easy for domain experts who know how to maintain the equipment, should you have downtime, right? But you can't have those experts over there on site, right? So how do you make sure that you can use some of these new concepts to collaborate between a technician who may be very low in his competence levels but is available on site versus a domain expert who's sitting, say, in your central offices, right? And how can they collaborate, with live information off the machine to troubleshoot